Hey y'all, Azim here. We're going to go over the different types of epithelium and look at their histology. So there are 8 different types of epithelia, kind of 9. So we'll go over all those. The first that we're going to go over is simple squamous epithelium. Simple because it's one layer, squamous meaning flat cells. So it's one layer of flat cells. Right now we're at 40x total looking at lung tissue. And these clusters of sacs, those are called alveoli. This is where air flows in and out and where we get gas exchange with blood vessels. So I'm going to switch to 100x. We can start to see the nuclei of these cells, and they're very thin and flat. Again, these clusters, these sac-like structures, those are called alveoli. So a single alveolus is made up of a bunch of these thin, flat cells. Going to 400x. There we are. We can see the nuclei of these very thin flat cells. There's a nucleus. Lots of nuclei here. Whoops. And here. Again, very, very thin, very, very flat. By being thin and flat, that allows for efficient exchange of gases. Thinner cells means faster diffusion. The same is true in the kidney. In the kidney, we also have thin, flat cells in one particular part of it. It's called the Bowman's capsule. I'm at 100x right now. See that circular thing? Not the middle part, but outside of the white. Outside of the white, that's the Bowman's capsule. Let's go a bit closer to 100x, or 400x, excuse me. And here you can see some nice, thin, flat cells. These cells are involved in the first part of kidney function, which is filtration. So they're catching the filtrate coming out of the blood vessels that are here. Blood vessels, like capillaries, are also lined with simple squamous epithelium, and what I'm pointing at, that's a cluster of capillaries called the glomerulus, which we'll get into later. So simple squamous, very thin, very flat, just one layer of cells. Our next epithelium type is stratified squamous. There are 2 types of stratified squamous epithelia. There's non-keratinized and keratinized. Right now we're in the esophagus, and this is non-keratinized. Many mucous membranes, especially ones that experience high friction, so closer towards the outside of the body, like the oral cavity, the front part of the nasal cavity, the esophagus, the anus, the vagina, the urethra, these all have non-keratinized stratified squamous. And so what I'm pointing at right now, the darker layer on top, that's non-keratinized stratified squamous. Switching to 100x, you can see the many layers. Stratified means layers. Layers of thin, flat cells. They get thinner the higher you go, because the very, very superficial layer, they're dead. This lowest basal layer, what I'm pointing at right now, they're a bit bigger because they're alive and they're undergoing mitosis. As they move up, they start to dehydrate and get flat and die. So the top layer is dead. Because they're non-keratinized, non-keratinized cells means they don't produce a protein called keratin, and by not producing that protein, that makes them less waterproof. So non-keratinized membranes are mucous membranes. They are not waterproofed. But we have many layers. Let me go to 400x just so you can see this at higher magnification. There we go. Very orderly layers, thin and flat, especially towards the superficial side. That was non-keratinized. What about keratinized? If we do have keratin on our membrane, on our epithelium, that means it is more tough and waterproof. If I can find it, there it is. Let's look right here. Okay, so this again is our keratinized epithelium. All of this, starting from this pointer up here, that's all dead flattened cells. These cells from here down to here are alive, but the whole thing, that's all keratinized stratified squamous. By being keratinized, again, it's tougher and more waterproofed. Bigger cells towards the basal side, so here's our basal layer, and the cells gradually dehydrate and die. This is thick skin from the palmar sole. So this is keratinized stratified squamous. Moving on to cuboidal. So squamous means flat, cuboidal means cube-shaped. We're looking right now at a salivary gland. It's the submandibular gland. This is 40x total. This is 100x total. And here is 400x total. There are two cell types here, actually. One is what I'm pointing at, the clearer one. Those are mucus cells, and mucus cells, mucus-producing cells like these or goblet cells tend to be clearer looking because the mucus makes the cell appear clearer. You don't really see the nucleus. The darker cells are serous cells, and they produce a more watery fluid. Mucus is thicker, serous is thinner. Both of these cell types, the serous cells and the mucus cells, they're simple cuboidal. Simple cuboidal cells are great for producing secretions. And so this is an exocrine gland. Endocrine glands are also good, are also simple cuboidal and good at producing secretions. Exocrine releases stuff to the outside of the body or a lumen space, like your mouth. Endocrine releases to the blood. And I got lucky here. We've got simple cuboidal in a small tube, and the center of these tubes are lumens. I also see stratified cuboidal right here. You see two layers. It's usually only 2 or 3 layers. Stratified cuboidal, 2 layers of cuboidal cells. This is the lumen of a duct. So all of those glands around it lead into this duct, and then the duct leads out to the lumen, say the oral cavity. So stratified cuboidal, not as common. You only find them lining ducts of glands, really. Moving on to the next shape, columnar. We're going to go to the stomach and duodenum, so the digestive tract, the latter part of the digestive tract. Here we are at 40x. Here we are at 100x, and you can see how wavy it is and how there are parts down here that are epithelia, but they're kind of cut at a weird angle because we're cutting through tissue. I'm going to get closer, though, to 400x. Okay. All of these cells, these darker cells that you see here and here, these are simple columnar. It's just one layer of columnar-shaped, rectangular-shaped cells. Let me go towards the duodenum. So all of these cells lined here, here, and here, and here, individual cells, columnar-shaped. Columnar-shaped are also good for secreting, but they can also absorb since it's just one layer, simple columnar. You find simple columnar lining the latter parts of the digestive tract, like the stomach and intestines, and reproductive tracts, like the uterus. Because they're bigger, like cuboidal, they can produce, and if it's one layer like this, it can also secrete. Simple columnar. Stratified columnar is a hard one to find. It's found in areas like the conjunctiva of the eye, which is the outer layer, one of the outer layers of the eye, as well as in very specific parts of the pharynx, anus, uterus, and male urethra, and ductus deferens, the vas deferens. So it is harder to find. It's not like, for instance, the pharynx is actually mostly non-keratinized stratified squamous. So is the anus. But in some parts you can find stratified columnar. So let's see if I can find it on this vas deferens section. There's a good chance I won't. So wish me luck. We're at 100x. We are at 400x. It's hard to tell if this is actually stratified right here or if it's just folded on itself. As you can see, it's kind of wrinkled right here too. So inconclusive. I can try going to oil. Let's see how that works out without the actual oil. Yeah, can't really tell so much more. So we'll have to take my word for it, or Wikipedia's word for it, or Google's, that you can find stratified columnar. It's very rare. It's a rare type, found in the body. It's found in the conjunctiva of the eye, which is an outer layer of the eyeball. Certain parts of the pharynx, anus, uterus, urethra, and ductus deferens. All right, 2 more types of epithelium. This next one is special to the urinary tract So there are parts of the kidney called the calyces, the minor calyx and the major calyx, and then there's the renal pelvis, and then that leads out to the ureter, down to the urinary bladder, and then the first part of the urethra. The last part of the urethra, where it exits, that's going to be non-keratinized stratified squamous. But everything that I mentioned, part of the urinary tract, that is transitional. Transitional is layered, but there is no order to the layer. Some are cuboidal, some are columnar, they're different shapes and in different layers, so it's all over the place. By being transitional, that allows it to stretch. So here I am at 100x, here I am at 400x. So 400x, we can see layers of epithelium, of epithelial cells. Some are flatter, some are cubed, some are columnar. It is a little confusing because it kind of looks like non-keratinized stratified squamous, but once again, if you take a look back at non-keratinized stratified squamous, it is that the stratified is the strata of the stratified are much more orderly. You can see nice orderly layers. There is no real order to the layers here. We're looking at the urinary bladder. Finally, we are moving on to our last epithelium. It is called pseudo-stratified columnar. So we've talked about columnar epithelium, but this one is pseudo-stratified. Pseudo-stratified means it looks like it's layered, but it's actually just one layer. It achieves that kind of illusion because the nuclei are at different heights. Like one nucleus is more towards the lumen, the other is less so. So where I'm pointing right now is the pseudo-stratified columnar. Great. And you can see some nuclei are higher up towards the apical side, some are in the middle, some are lower towards the basal side. But really, they're just all squeezing up against one another. Those are pseudo-stratified columnar. And here we're looking at the trachea. You can see these little things on the apical side. Those are cilia. So this is pseudo-stratified ciliated columnar epithelium. And cilia help sweep things, in this case sweeping mucus up and out so that things don't get trapped up in our respiratory tract. One other cell type, as long as we're here, let's see if I can find a better example. I'm trying to look for a light colored cell like what we saw in the salivary glands, a very, very light colored cell. Those are goblet cells. This one's actually not stained great for it, so I'm going to find a much better example. Let me find one from the intestines. The intestines and the respiratory tract both have high amounts of goblet cells. So they're also mucus-producing cells, just like in the salivary glands, but these mucus cells are individual. They're not clustered together. So here you can see very clearly, this is in the colon, the large intestines, these light-colored cells. Normally in the large intestines, all the darker cells, those are simple columnar, but these light-colored cells, those are goblet cells. They produce mucus. And in the large intestines, you want mucus to help pass the developing feces along because it's getting drier and drier, and you don't want to damage the lining of your intestines. So goblet cells are also mucus-producing cells. If they're light-colored and you don't really see a nucleus and it's within a cell, epithelial cell layer, you can see a ton here. Those are goblet cells. All right, that's all the epithelial types, along with some glands.